This video is going to be Chapter 4 for the Netacad CCNA Course 1, and it's going to be a two-part video, and this is part 1 of 2. I'll have a link at the end of this video for part 2 once that's complete. My name is Jason Johnson. Thank you for watching. If you find this information helpful and you want to be updated on future videos, just subscribe to my channel. Or if you have any questions, you can just leave a comment below, and I'll try to get back to you as quick as possible. Okay, let's take a look at Chapter 4. Chapter 4 is going to be broken down into two parts. The first part is going to be the introduction, physical layer, protocols, network media, and then part 2, which will be a separate video, is going to be on data link layer protocols and media access control. So let's talk about physical layer protocols, or layer 1, when we talk about the network, or network access. So in this section, we're going to look at identifying device connectivity options. We're going to describe the purpose of the functions of the physical layer in the network, and we're going to describe basic principles of the physical layer standards. So on the physical layer connection, we have different types of connections that we can make to a network. With the home router, and this is what we're looking at here, is a little Cisco home router. In fact, I think this is close to the same model I have at my house. And we have an internet connection, and you'll usually see that that's somehow usually identified by a different color. This one has 4 ports on the back side, which act as a router act as a router for there. So you have your incoming network, or your incoming internet, or your WAN side of the network, and then you have your LAN side, LAN, on this side here. So when you connect in, you connect your computer into one of the ports here, and that's how you connect into the wired LAN, and then you can see all the other devices that are on these other 4 ports. And if you have it set up that way, you can see whatever's happening on the Wi-Fi. If you have Wi-Fi broadcasting out of this and you have it not segmented out, whoever's plugged in on the hardwire side will also be able to see the wireless side. Now, network interface cards, you can have Wi-Fi, or you can have wireless, or you can have a standard plug-in, and that's what they're plugging in here into a side of a laptop or your desktop. Those are called the NIC cards, or the network interface card. And so I get, yes, and saying NIC card is a little bit redundant, so you just say that's the NIC, or that's the network interface card. But you usually in the networking world, you call those NICs, or your network card. And then you can also have different types of connections for wireless devices, and you can do Wi-Fi range extenders. All those, these aren't that popular. There's not a lot of these out there. Usually you're going to have some type. This is the wireless N router, and that is what we saw in the previous picture or previous slide. And then you can do extenders in your house. They do make them that you can plug into your electrical socket, and those work off the copper wiring in your house, and they do work in conjunction with the electrical interface that's happening in your house, or the electrical wires that are happening in your house. Those don't work against each other. They use those in they use that electrical copper wire, or copper wiring, to broadcast themselves through the house or through your building, if you do try something like that. But you don't see those that often. They're not that common. Now, what is the purpose of the physical layer? The purpose of the physical layer is to allow devices to communicate with each other. So when we're looking at the layer 7 here of the 7 layers of the OSI, the physical layer resides at this bottom layer right here. This is how we physically connect 2 networks together, or not 2 nodes into a network, or 2 nodes together, or a node into a network. And so you have that digital signal, or if it's wireless, you'll have that wireless signal going across the network, and this is represented. That's a digital signal there. Or you can have a wireless signal that's going up and down, and those, either way, those are bits that are going through, and those are saying, that's turned on, that's turned off. So you have 1s are turned on and 0s are turned off in the valleys. And same thing here, those are 1 1 0. You have the peaks are 1s, the valleys are 0s, is how they're represented in a visual format. And you have those in 1s and 0s that are represented on here. Now, on the physical layer media, electrical signals on a copper cable, they're not going to be a uniform up and down. You're going to see, if you look at a actual signal on there, you're going to see that they are up and down. And so if they go past a certain threshold, you'll actually see 1s, and you can get 1s and 0s out of that, like that, and they'll be based on the timing, because there's a timing on these signals that are supposed to be coming through. So it'll wait, there's timing on this, and it'll say, okay, I should have got a signal, a beat. If I don't get anything, it just means it's all zeros coming through. And when you send those through, that's ones or zeros. And so based upon how much static you're getting or how much interference you're getting, you're going to see a signal like this. A light pulse is going to be how strong the light is coming through. So if the light turns off, it's a 0, and if the light switch turns on, it's a 1, or if it pulses bright enough. So it's not really just an off or on. It's not turning itself off and on. It's actually sending a light pulse. So it's getting brighter, getting darker. And at the fiber optic level, it's not something that you can perceive with your eye. It's really at that level. And then when you have microwave signals, you've got different signals down here on the wireless. You can either have a digital signal, which is more uniform, AM signals, FM signals, radio signals. Those are going to be more wave-like that are coming through, like I was showing you. Those are going to be more wave-like, and then you could kind of draw a line. It should be a straight line there, but I can't draw very well with my mouse. But if it goes above that line, it's considered a 1 or on. And if it goes below, it's off on there. Now, when we're talking about the physical layer standards, the OSI does set standards. Different organizations set some standards on this. The physical layer are implemented in hardware and governed by different organizations depending upon which medium you're using. So if you're using Ethernet versus wireless, it's going to be a different organization, but those are pretty much governed. The data link and the physical layer are governed by these various organizations. And the TCP/IP standards are implemented in software and governed by the IETF. And that's everything from part of the data link layer here all the way up through the application layer. So layers 2 all the way up through 7 are governed by this organization, and then the physical media, depending upon the type of media, is governed by one of these organizations here. Now, some of the characteristics of the physical layer, depending upon what we're, this is some of the terminology. Let me just say it this way. This is some of the terminology you need to become familiar with. For this course, for the Netacad course, you need to know this information as far as be aware of it, but and you may have some of these on some of the quizzes. You may see 1 or 2 questions on the final exam for this area here, but it's not as big of an area of the course as in other areas. And you're going to get into this if you deal with any like data communications. You're going to get more into these types of this information here. So when we talk about the Manchester encoding, that's, you see the digital signal. And again, if it goes above the line, it becomes a 1. And so based on the timing, you're going to see, a 1, and then because it cuts off, and because this is your timing here, this is your timing here, and depending on how it turns on and turns off, it's going to be a 1 or a 0. And then you have another term called modulation, and modulation is a modulating wave, or the size of the wave, or how often the wave's going. So you have these different signals, and so FM, if you never knew that, is for frequency modulation, and AM is for amplitude modulation. Now, a lot of you younger listeners, and I would say those of you that are under 25, probably do know what an AM and FM radio is, but you probably didn't grow up with one driving around in a car where all you had on for entertainment in the car was an AM and FM radio. And the area of the country that I grew up, we had about 3 FM stations and 2 or 3 AM stations, and hardly even any of those if I remember correctly. And those signals come through in waves, or they're modulated when they come across. Now, another term that you need to be familiar with, and you're going to just need to memorize this, and when somebody says bandwidth, you need to just know what bandwidth is and what it's really talking about. Bandwidth is really how wide your road is, and I'm going to use the analogy of a highway or where cars drive down through. So bandwidth, you have different units of bandwidth. You have bits per second. Don't get this confused with bytes, because it's not bytes, it's bits. Bits are your 1s and 0s, and that's different than bytes, which is 8 bits. So we're dealing in bits per second, or kilobytes, or it's not kilobytes, excuse me, kilobits. I said that wrong. So it's not kilobytes, it's kilobits. So there is a difference here, and this is where some get that confused, and you even heard me just pronounce it wrong. So when you're talking about kilobits, you're talking about bandwidth. And when you're talking about kilobytes, you're talking about size of a storage, or what you're storing. So we're talking about kilobits here, and it goes up using the metric system: kilobits, megabits, gigabits, terabits, and that's your speed. And that's how much bandwidth is how much data you can push through a particular area. So when we talk about bandwidth, we're talking about how much can we, how wide is that? How wide is that road? And when we talk about throughput, throughput is how much data can we put through at a particular time. So how many cars can we drive down that road at any particular time? And so that's where you'll have megabits per second. You're usually going to measure it at this time, late 2016 or fall of 2016 when this video was recorded, that you were measuring it in megabits. Usually, if you're talking about some kind of a cable connection or some type of a DSL connection or something along those lines. So you might have 80 megabits per second download speed and about 8 megabits upload speed. And this is just showing a graphic here. And usually, depending upon which website or what service you use to measure your throughput, they're going to use some type of gauge like that to give you a visual. So that's what we're talking about. So when we're talking about data, bandwidth is the size of your road, or how much can you put through at any one particular second. And throughput is how much are you actually putting through at a particular second. So megabits is your bandwidth, or your bits here is your megabit, and then your throughput is your how much data can you push through. Okay, so types of physical media. This is a back of a Cisco router here, I believe a 1941, just looking at it. And when you're looking at the back of this switch, you've got your power switch here, you've got your power cord that you plug in, and then you've got your fast Ethernet ports here, your fast Ethernet switch ports. You have your SHDSL connector there. Down, you have your management ports here. Those are your management ports. Those are your either USB that you can connect in. You have your console port. Or not your console port, that's your WAN interface, excuse me. That's your gigabit internet interface there. Your console ports over here. And then you have your USB type connectors as well to go in. So those are the different types of connectors that you can put on there. And that's you'd plug in, you've got your RJ45 Ethernet here. Same thing here with your, you'd have your cable to connect to your device, or you're using RJ45 to USB going through here, and then you got your gigabit gigabit Ethernet interfaces, and these are usually going to be connected to a switch or to another router on there. Okay, so that is that interview. Let's take a look at network media, and let's talk about cabling, and let's talk about a shielded pair, unshielded twisted pair, and some of the differences between Ethernet, copper, and fiber optic and wireless, and look at the differences between those. So first of all, let's take a look at copper cabling. Copper cabling is your most used network connection, layer 1 medium, because it's the cheapest, it's the most cost effective. It doesn't run as far of a distance as fiber optics, but it does run farther than wireless, and it's more reliable. So you've got some different characteristics here. You've got a pure digital signal that's going through. This means that you've got a good signal going through. You've got good ones and zeros that are being, again, this is your timing. This is your timing of your network. And you've got these devices, these signals going through that's giving you good ones and zeros. This is if you're getting some kind of interference. Let's say that you put it too close to it's an unshielded twisted pair, and you put it too close to a fluorescent light, and you're getting interference on there, and so your signal drops off either below 0 or dead. It's usually not going to drop below 0 unless you're getting some kind of spike, negative spike or something on there, but you're just not getting any signal whatsoever. If you plug a cable in, you don't get anything, but there may be signals coming through. May look something like that. And then this is digital signal interference. If you're getting interference there, and so if you're not getting good, strong signal, this is another instance here. You may not getting all your ones and through properly, and it's not going to read correctly because the sending device is going to be sending through a certain set of ones and zeros, and the receiving device is not going to get that on their end, so it's not going to come through properly. Copper media is going to look similar to this. It comes in different colors: blue, green, black, yellow. orange. It comes in all different colors, and that's really just a personal preference. There are some places that will color code depending upon where you're connecting. And they'll try to sometimes put some kind of rhyme or reason to it to say, okay, all of these connections are going to be yellow cable, and all of our patch cables and the cabinet are going to be green. It's really more of when you're designing your network, just kind of a preference of how you're going to set your network up. And inside that, you're going to, and this is an unshielded twisted pair here, and you're going to have twisted, and that's where the twisted comes from, but there's no shielding in there. This is what you would see with the shielding here, this metal shielding in there. But the unshielded twisted pair, you're going to have twisted wires in there. And it's interesting to, if you've ever wondered why we twist the wires, I'm not going to go through it in this particular video, but if what you want to do is go check out, in fact, I will throw up a link real quick to a Wikipedia page that will give you a little bit more insight in that. So I'm going to pause right here and put a link there. Okay, I just pulled this website up right here, and it is, let me just show this to you. And I will also put a link in the description below for this link, so it'll be easier for you to find. But this is from the Tech Republican, a little bit older page here, but it explains very well on why Ethernet cable is twisted, and it does go back to the telegraph days. Alexander Graham Bell, they were running telegraph wires, and they found that if they twisted the wires at every telephone pole, they got a signal that lasted longer or that went farther. Or another term that you're going to become familiar with is attenuation. And so that's why we twist wires. And so in this page talks about unshielded twisted versus shielded twisted, and it just gives some really good information. And like I said, it's a little bit older article back from 2010, but it's still very relevant to networking today. Okay, so back to our PowerPoint here, and we're looking at copper media unshielded twisted pair. That's where we have no shielding around it, but you do have the twist to each one of the wires. And then you have shielded twisted pair where you have some type of shielding, usually some type of metallic material. You're also going to see in all of these, and this one has probably already been cut off, but you're going to see some type of string, some type of something that runs alongside in the wires here, and that gives it some strength also, so it doesn't, if it gets pulled around a corner or gets yanked on or it gets tugged on, that string gives it some strength so that those copper wires don't break as easy. And then you have coax cable, which is even stronger, but it's less flexible. The copper media up here, shielded, twisted pair, and unshielded. It goes around corners easier. It's easier to work with. It's less expensive than coax cable. And with coax cable, you can see that there's a lot more involved to it. You have your inner core copper wire. You have your plastic coating. You have your shielding. And then you have your mesh here. If you notice, these copper wires are meshed. That acts as your Faraday cage. Or your shielding. Again, it's part of the shielding to keep interference from coming in. And then you have your outer coating, your outer plastic cover there, which also protects the cable. Okay, so with an unshielded twisted pair, I'm going to go through these real quick here. You can pause and read over these if you want to, but you have your outer jacket, you have your twisted pair, and your color-coded insulation. On the shielded twisted, you have your jacket, you have your some kind of foil shield or some kind of braided foil shield. You also have foil shields in a lot of cases around the actual twist so that they don't interfere with each other. And then you have your twisted pairs of wire. In a coaxial, this is another breakdown of this, and you have different types of connectors on the ends of those. You have a B and C connector, an N type, or an F type. Usually you're going to see these F types with cable. When you have cable internet or like a Comcast or Time Warner, something like that, you're going to have these F type connectors that come in. Those are the most familiar ones that you're going to see. Now, when we're dealing with safety, you need to separate your data and your electrical power cabling. You need to always comply with safety codes. If you're doing an install, you need to make sure that you're always safe with dealing with wires, even though you don't carry any type of electrical signal on cabling or network internet or your network cabling. You want to be careful if you're running wires around any type of electrical, because a lot of times when you're dealing with these types of networks, you are working in and around electrical boxes or in other electrical places. So you want to make sure that you don't touch wires. You want to make sure that things are turned off before you start sticking your hands into boxes and moving things around. And you usually, and almost in all cases, you do not want to run your network cable in the same places where you have your power cables, because unless you're shielded, you're going to get electrical EMI, or electromagnetic interference, from the power over to the electrical lines. You need to make sure that your cables are connected correctly. You need to make sure, now here, this is somebody that would rock your world, because they've used different color cables, and typically you want to use, for those OCD folks out there, you would use same type of cables, and also ones with protectors on there. And you've seen probably pictures on the internet or out good cabling jobs, bad cabling jobs, but you want to make sure that they're connected correctly. You want to make sure that they are installations are not inspected for damage over time. I've seen some really bad installs. One most recent where the cable was put on the outside of the building. It was not a shielded, it was not an outdoor cable, and it did not have any type of PVC jacket or tube to put in. And over time, the cable was moved up and down the building and cut through it, because the weather was moving the cable up and down, and the sun damage over time. And so you just want to make sure that you are installing in the proper place, and that you have it inspected, there's no damage to things. And then also make sure that equipment's grounded properly, so that you're not getting any type of improper ground faults or things like that. Okay, so let's look at unshielded twisted pair cabling and look at the properties of these. I'm going to go through these fairly quickly. You're going to find a lot of great information out on the internet, so I'm going to just go through these rather quickly and just point out some highlights. So you're typically going to have 4 pair of wire. You're going to have 8 wires, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, inside of some type of plastic coating or plastic sheathing. A lot of times, like I said, you're going to have some type of plastic wire or plastic line that comes with that, some kind of either fiberglass or some type of plastic that runs along with there, and you usually have to cut that off when you cut these to put your end points on there. And you have different categories, and these are the 3 main categories. You have your category 3. Those are usually, you're not going to see those much anymore. Those are usually used for voice communication, phone companies, phone lines. You don't see those in the networking world. You're probably going to see most often Cat5, Cat5e, and those are unshielded twisted pair here that they're showing you. Those are 4 pair of wires. And then you're also going to have category 6 or Cat6. You'll hear Cat5, Cat5e, Cat6, but they're really talking about category. And you can look those up in your material to find more out on that. You've got different types of connectors. You've got this is an RJ45 unshielded twisted pair plug. This is a socket where you would lay the wires in here and punch those down on the back side, and those wires would come in like that. And you'd punch those down with a punch down tool, and then you'd have your other plug-in that come in on this side. And so those wires connect into the little, usually gold connector inside, or gold plated, and then it connects in there. This is a bad example here because you want your sheathing to be underneath. There's a little clamp right there, and you want your sheathing to be underneath there because you don't want that pulling out on that. And you've got your 2 different versions here. You've got T568A and T568B. I do not memorize these. I have to pull these up every time I do cabling because I don't do cabling often enough. But there is a rhyme and reason. There is a reason, and there's a set standard for these. And the reason is because when you go into a facility and you see that one end is, or you see that cable is set at T568A, you know all of them should be set that way. So you don't want to mix and match these when you're installing networks. You want to follow one standard. And some companies have a standard that they follow. Other companies could care less. When I first got into networking, I didn't use a standard at all. I kind of taught myself networking back in the late 90s, and I just kind of figured out the wiring and how you had to do that. And then I started doing some official research and realized, hey, wait a minute, there's a standard with this. And so I took some official classes and realized, hey, you need to follow standards on this. And there's different types depending upon how you do the pairs and how you roll the wires. There's a straight through, and that connects a network host to a network device such as a switch or a hub. You have a crossover, connects 2 network hosts or 2 network intermediary devices. And then you have a rollover cable, and that's where it connects a workstation serial port to a router console port using an adapter. Now, just a note here, a lot of new devices, a lot of the new Cisco devices have auto sensing And so it will pick up and see what the wires are, and it'll auto sense and it'll automatically set it for you. But older devices do not. So you need to be mindful of what type of cable you're using and which type of standard you're using on these. Okay, and there's testers. There's videos out on the internet on how to do testers and how to work with those. You plug one into the cable here, you plug the other in, and you've got tone testers to see which wire you're connecting to is the proper one on each end. And then you also have them that do all sorts of things. You've got a very low-end level that will just tell you if you have the right cables connected on each end. You've got them that will do signal loss, that'll tell you how good of a signal you're getting through. Are you getting interference, things like that. So they range anywhere from $25, $30 for a low end up to maybe a couple $100 for a real nice one that will do attenuation and signal loss and or attenuation and crosstalk and things like that, and it'll also help you wire map out or map your wiring. Now on fiber optic, you're unless you're going into the fiber optics, you're probably not going to deal with fiber optics very often, except within maybe your backbone, because it's more expensive. You usually cannot, just like with cable wiring here, you're going to pull cable wiring apart yourself and put your own ends on. In fiber optics, you can as well, but it's a lot more expensive, and that's why it doesn't get used as often. So with fiber optics, you have to you have your fiber optic cable, you have your core, your strengthening material, your outer jacket. So it looks a lot like the coax cable, but it's actually got a light inner core where the light pulses go through. And then you have different types of fiber media. You have single mode, where you might have 9 microns, or glass cladding, does 125 microns diameter, and then polymetric or PVC or plastic coating there. And you have multi-mode, and these are the way the signals go through. If you see the signals here, you got a single light signal, or you've got to allow multiple paths for the light, so you can see multi-mode. You can send multiple paths through at the same time. You have these different types of connectors. You're probably going to see some of these in the Cisco world in your network devices when you do backbones. But you have ST connectors, SC, duplex, LC, different type. And you're usually going to see cables like it. These cannot bend very easily, so you don't want to bend them around corners. They don't bend the same way that Ethernet cables do or copper cables, so you want to be careful about that because you can snap them, and they're expensive. You have testers for fiber optics, and those are same way. They can run from a low end all the way up to the high end, and those test the light signals. Those test to see if you're getting proper signal through. Now, when we're talking about the distances, when you talk about unshielded twisted pair cabling, it's much cheaper. It's a lot more cost effective to put it in, but there are some differences that you have to make a choice about. The distance on an unshielded twisted pair is about 1 to 100 meters, about 300 feet. Maybe you can get a little bit more if you don't have maybe if you do shielding, but about 300 feet on that. Versus fiber optics, you can go from 1 to 100,000 meters, which is about 60 miles, I believe, if I did the calculations right on that. So you can go a lot farther with fiber optics, but it's more expensive. Immunity to EMI and radio frequency, it's very immune, or it's completely immune to any type of interference, but unshielded twisted pair is going to get signal problems from EMI or on that. Electrical hazards is low on here, but it's high here. Or, it's immunity to it. It's completely immune to electrical hazards. But it's high cost, high installation skills required, and a lot of high safety precautions when you're putting that in. And here, just about anybody can be taught within just a few hours how to install copper cabling and how to put ends on. In a 10-minute class, I can show you how to put in an endpoint, and you can go look up YouTube videos on how to do that. But with fiber optics, it costs a lot more, and it takes a lot more time to do that. And last, we're going to talk about wireless media. And this is just going to be a few slides on here. You're going to see wireless media represented in a few different ways, whether you have Wi-Fi, or whether you have Bluetooth, or you have different connecting. But in the Cisco world, you're going to see these different IDs or icons, like a Bluetooth mouse, or you have a cell phone tower. Or you have network connection, maybe a smart TV, along those lines. So you're going to see these different icons in the Cisco world when you're dealing with putting things together. You're also going to see some different types of media, either Wi-Fi or Bluetooth. And in your course, you should have more information on these. I'm not going to do a lot of time talking on this video here. We're going to wrap it up. But for the inside the course, the Netacad course, you're going to have a lot more material on these. That's a wireless LAN router there. Okay, so we talked about the physical layer protocols and network media. This is the conclusion of part 1 for chapter 4. Again, if you have any questions, leave a comment down below. If you like this material and you want to see more videos, then click subscribe. Or if there's a particular, I'm doing this whole series on the Netacad, but if there's more different type of material that you want to see from maybe a different type of IT area, just leave me a comment below or send me an email, and I'll see if I can work on that particular presentation and put a video together for you. So have a great day. Again, my name is Jason Johnson. Thank you for watching.